Guys, how are you? I'm good, thank you. Thank you for coming to the most boringly titled VidCon presentation I've ever given. This is Posting Schedules and You, hosted by Matt Gielen. So, my name is Matt Gielen. I'm the CEO and founder of a consulting agency called Little Monster, and I've done a few other things. How many people were here yesterday at 4 p.m. and heard me go through the ramble? Okay, to those of you guys, I'm sorry. You're going to have to hear my story again. For the people who haven't heard it, I'll try to go very... That was a good story. Thanks. I got the peanut gallery today. Jesus Christ. Okay. So I went to a school in New York called Columbia University. I studied film. I was an okay student, a better pothead, and even better at playing this video game called Age of Mythology. I would come to learn later in life that the last two things were the most helpful in my career, oddly enough. But anyways, I graduated college. I made a film. It did really, really well for an independent film. We self-distributed, and I ran the online marketing for that, what would later become known as audience development. Is where I learned how to do all the wonderful stuff I will talk to you guys about in a minute. After making that film, I realized I never wanted to produce anything ever again. But I really loved building audiences. And I started at a company called Driver Digital, where I oversaw audience development as well as production and creative. And we did really well. We got up to about 10 million monthly views by the time I left, and this was in Mom and Kids, and it was about 2 years before you could just film yourself opening surprise eggs and become a millionaire. So I missed that boat. But it did lead to a job at a company called Frederator. At Frederator, I basically did the same thing. They brought me over when they got a bunch of money in the very first YouTube Originals tranche to run audience development for Cartoon Hangover. We launched the channel about a month after I started. Within a couple months, we had a couple 100,000 subscribers. By the time I left, we were at about 2 million subscribers. We also had the Channel Frederator Network, which was a network of 3,000 animation channels. We did about 500 million monthly views, and our promise to our creators was we'd help you build your audience. And we did really well with that, especially when our network was around 100, 200 channels, but as we grew, we couldn't really hold the hands of our creators as well as we could when it was small. There was just too many of them and too few of us. Stop me if you've heard that story before. Only a few people with MCNs, okay. 2018 VidCon, all right. Anyways, what we did see, though, was that when we promoted our network channels from an owned and operated property, they would do really well. The problem was we really couldn't do that from Cartoon Hangover because it was a completely different brand. We could do that, though, from Channel Frederator. The problem with Channel Frederator was that it only had about 50,000 subscribers. A video hadn't been uploaded to it in about 2 years, and it only was doing about 100,000 monthly views. Well, we took over programming for it, and in about 13 months, we had 1 million subs and was doing between 12 and 17 million views. And so we could promote, and our channels in our network would do really, really well and get lots of views. And during that time, part of our branding mission was to become known as the best online video programmers in the world. So that's everything that you put up, how you put it up, how it's packaged, all that good stuff. And so I would write research papers for a website called TubeFilter. And all of them are still up there, and I highly recommend you go and read them. But they were things like the definitive guide to making YouTube thumbnails that will get clicked, the best times to post, which is actually still read significantly, which I guess is the impetus for this panel or presentation. How you can make BuzzFeed style content, which is my most underrated work. What the fuck is watch time, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the YouTube algorithm, which I wrote in order to write reverse engineering the YouTube algorithm. So when I released that, I left Frederator. That was about 2 years ago when I started my company Little Monster. We help media brands, big and small, build audiences on YouTube through a combination of production, paid media, and consultation. And about 6 months into that, Google released a white paper called something along the lines of the recommendation systems for YouTube. But it was basically a research paper written by Google engineers that was like, hey, here's how our algorithm works. So I wrote that, which is also available on TubeFilter. And then last year at VidCon, I released Cracking YouTube in 2017. Again, all of these are available on TubeFilter for free. You can read them. I highly suggest all of you do that as a to-do note. as your homework. So this session, this is best time to post. And the basic answer to that is it's all relative. So let me show you a couple examples. So this is one of my clients, and the best time for him to post is actually at 4 a.m., right? That's not usual for a US-based channel. Pacific time. It doesn't matter, to be perfectly honest, though. The best time for him is 4 a.m. Pacific because he has a large international audience. I have another client, and the best time for them to post is 11 a.m. And the reason that is because you want to post when your viewership hits its plateau for the day. And pretty much every channel I've ever seen has a daily plateau, right? Like it starts sloping up at some point, then it kind of flattens out for a number of hours, right? And then it fades off again as you get into the later hours. It's pretty consistent across channels. And the reason you want to do that is because of a concept called view velocity, which we'll dive into here in a second. So from a time of day standpoint, it's all relative, and it's all relative to your channel. So what you want to do is when you go into your analytics, you want to find out when that plateau begins and post it either an hour before that hour or the hour after that happens. So some things to consider when you're looking at like what's the best time of day for me to post. Your real-time graph is heavily influenced by your posting schedule. So if you've always posted at 10 a.m., you are far more likely to have an audience that is going to be on YouTube at 10 a.m., right? Because YouTube serves your video the farthest in the minutes and hours after upload in terms of people who have already watched your content. So what ends up happening is you're conditioning your audience and thereby the algorithm to expect uploads at the time you upload it. The best time to look for what is your optimal time is on a day where you don't post a video, because I'm sure what some of you are saying there is like, well, I usually post at 4 and I'm in that plateau, and then when I post, my views are much higher, so shouldn't I post at that time? No, you should post at the beginning of that plateau so that you get all the following hours when people are on the platform, when your audience is there. Generally, younger audiences in the US are most active from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time. Older audiences are most active from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And kids are typically up early and go to bed early, like little kids. And the reason that is all kind of anecdotal, right? Like if you have a younger audience, they're on their phones on the way to school, at school, and after school, right? And then in the evening, they're sometimes on YouTube, but sometimes they're doing homework, sometimes they're watching stuff on their computer or playing computer games. There's a lot more options for them. So that ends up being their most active times is early in the morning into the early afternoon. For older audiences, they're on YouTube when they're at fucking work. It's all good. Thank you for the money for the views. All right, day of week. Again, it's all relative. The first graph is one of my clients, and they only post videos during the week. And so therefore, all their audience comes during the week. Now, what we saw was that there's probably a lot of opportunities for them to post on the weekend because their audience is generally younger. And if you look at the next graph, this is a graph from another client, and they have a younger audience, and what that graph shows is that by far the best day for them to post content is Saturday. You might be looking at that graph and going, well, isn't Sunday good too? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because a video has a life cycle beyond its first day of posting, right? And the very next days following Sunday are his poorest days for viewership. So when this guy would really want to post is on Thursdays and Saturdays so that he gets the most viewership possible on those videos on the highest viewership days. So things to consider for day of week. Oh, sorry, going back to this slide real quick. The first graph is also representational of an older audience. Even though I literally just said they have a younger audience, this is typically the type of graph we see for an older audience. They're typically not on YouTube on the weekends at all, and again, just during the week because they're at work. All right, so your best days of post are influenced by your posting schedule again, right? So if we go back to the graph we just looked at on the left, they had heavily influenced the algorithm and the audience to watch during the week, even though some of their best days might be on the weekend. And generally, younger audiences are most active Thursday through Sunday morning. In fact, if you ever look at your real-time graph on a Sunday, it could be the most terrifying thing in the world, right? Because it just begins to like drop out of nowhere. But that happens for most people who have a younger audience channel. Generally, older audiences are most active Sunday through Thursday, and this is especially true for like education channels. We actually see Sunday usually being the best day and it kind of tapering off through Thursday. And that's because people have some free time on Sunday and they want to learn something. That's when they go to YouTube. So I mentioned earlier about posting schedule and why you want to post at the most active times. And the reason is very simple. It's view velocity. So if you read Reverse Engineering the YouTube Algorithm, this graph will look familiar. This is a graph of Channel Frederator's viewership from probably 2 or 3 years ago. And essentially what we found was that the percentage of subscribers as it pertains to views, so if you have 1 million subscribers, you get 100,000 views on your first day, that's 10%, right? I know not all of those are subscriber views, but we use that as a basis for comparison. And what we found was the higher the percentage in the first day, the better the 6-month viewership or lifetime viewership here was. So when we would get 9% or more of our audience, as it pertains to our subscribers, to watch in the first 24 or 48 hours, we saw massive upticks in views, right? And it was exponential. What we also saw was what we called negative view velocity, where if you got a small percentage of your subscriber base in views in the first 48 hours, not only did that video perform poorly, but the videos that you posted afterwards also performed poorly. So that's why it's incredibly important to post your videos when the largest section possible of your audience is on the platform and watching, because you want as many of them as possible to watch in the first hour, in hours 1 through 3. What's up?